It's only 100 feet from the seawall to the edge of where the deposit is.
The deposit activist Ray Lutz is referring to is where Edison plans to store 3.6 million pounds of nuclear waste at San Onofre. The permit from the California Coastal Commission for the storage is for 20 years, but Lutz argues that the permit is practically permanent because there's no long-term nuclear waste storage site in the United States.
They don't know if it will be removed in 2051 as they're planning, or even for many decades after that.
And yet, in March 2015, when the Coastal Commission asked Edison to elaborate on a sea level rise scenario in 2100 at San Onofre, the company said, quote, it does not believe that consideration of impacts beyond 2051 is reasonable or necessary. Even so, Edison still answered the Coastal Commission with a projection 83 years from now, and it's not good. Edison wrote that this site is expected to be inundated by the turn of the next century if there's no seawall. And while there's a seawall here now, the Coastal Commission has not approved upgrading it to protect the radioactive waste deposit. Edison's response has left consumer lawyer Mike Aguirre perplexed.
You know, you're saying that the plant's going to be inundated within the time frame that it may very well be there. Does that really make a lot of sense?
KPBS reached out to Edison, but the company declined to answer questions about why it didn't think it was reasonable or necessary to consider what sea level rise would look like at San Onofre past 2051. The company instead referred questions to the Coastal Commission. So we reached out to the Coastal Commission, but a spokeswoman there did not respond directly to the question about Edison's stance. When it comes to sea level rise along the West Coast, California is particularly vulnerable.
It's an international problem.
Scripps Institution of Oceanography professor Helen Fricker says as the ice sheets on Greenland and Antarctica thaw out, California could bear the brunt of the rise, as much as 30% more than other areas. That's because of gravity and the way the Earth rotates.
And in the next 3 to 5 decades, that could really start to ramp up, and we might start seeing significant sea level rise here in California.
How significant, she says, also depends on emissions and global average temperatures.
But there are some very, very high estimates on the order of 10 feet or so by 2100.
For San Onofre Nuclear Power Plant, that means a wet outlook.
San Onofre is along a part of the coastline that is very exposed. It is rather hard to protect it. I'm assuming that a very high, like a big king tide event with a big storm surge that would inundate the site would be a problem. And the probability of that happening is going to be rather high.
Aguirre says sea level rise alone was enough reason for the Coastal Commission to refuse to give Edison a permit to store nuclear waste at San Onofre. Aguirre has sued to get the permit revoked, and settlement talks are underway to move the toxic material elsewhere.
How can someone who cares about San Diego, who cares about the coastline, agree to put 3 million pounds of nuclear waste on the shoreline where they know it's going to be inundated, have no system in place for moving it, have no place to move it to? It has no concern for the public.
Amita, Sharma, KPBS News.